So the last period of Greek history is known as Hellenistic Greece, and it's easy to confuse Hellenistic and Hellenic, but you need to keep these straight as well. When you think of Hellenistic Greece, which lasts from about 324 to 100 BC, you need to think of one particular individual, and of course that is Alexander the Great. Now, after the Greek city-states are weakened from the Peloponnesian Wars, a power and a kingdom to the north in Macedonia begins to try to conquer slowly the different weakened city-states and try to bring under their control all of the Peloponnese. And they're able actually to do that under Philip of Macedon, who was the Macedonian king at the time, Philip II. And he is able to come down with a very advanced military and basically subdue and conquer these Greek city-states. He's able to do this with his phalanx infantry, which is a kind of military technology or innovation in warfare that was relatively new. And as you can see from the image here, basically infantry soldiers would carry these extremely long 10-12 foot spears, and they were very, very disciplined. They were able to march in tight formation and basically become like a lawnmower that would just march across the battlefield and mow down any soldiers or cavalry in its path. And the spears were so long that other infantry, other soldiers, hoplites, and other warriors couldn't get close to the phalanx. So Philip is the one that actually devises this. Of course, Alexander makes use of it later. Now, when Philip dies in 336 BC, his son Alexander inherits his kingdom, inherits Macedonia, as well as all of Greece that had been united under Philip. And Alexander, even though he's taking his father's military and he's inheriting his father's kingdom, was much more ambitious and much more of a military genius than his father ever was. And so Alexander wants to not only control all of Greece, but he begins to turn his attention eastward. In particular, he looks to the Persian Empire, which still controls much of the Mediterranean and Southwest Asia. Now, Alexander leads his very disciplined and highly trained military on a campaign to defeat the Persians. Persia at this time is still, by the way, considered the preeminent, the most powerful empire in the world. And it was extremely risky to attack Persia head on. And even though the Persians had been defeated and repelled by the Greek city-states, they're still, as I said, considered pretty much invincible. And so this was very, very risky. But Alexander is successful, and he is able to defeat the Persians, several Persian armies in the Mediterranean, before defeating the Persian Emperor Darius in modern-day Turkey at the Battle of Issus, which would be right about here. That's a very decisive Battle of Issus. Now here's actually the famous mosaic of Alexander at the Battle of Issus. And so now, even after defeating the Persians, once he's done defeating the Persians, Alexander still is not satisfied, and he continues his march. He keeps pushing eastward, and he eventually turns his attention to South Asia, to India. But he gets to the Indus River Valley. He's able to defeat several territorial kingdoms and military states there. Some gave in rather easily, and some put up quite a fight. But he's eventually able to conquer much of northwest, that northwest region of South Asia, and Pakistan region. But after being gone for, at this point now, about 10 years. He had been on a campaign for 10 years. His men had grown homesick and exhausted, and his army really refuses to push any further than the Indus River Valley and the Himalayas. And so this really becomes kind of the eastern border of Alexander's empire. And now, unfortunately, on their way back, on his return trip, and this happens pretty quickly after the Alexander agrees to go back home, Alexander dies on his way back home, and this ends the hope that his empire would stay officially united. And as you can see, all of his empire and the lands he had conquered are divided up amongst his top generals. Alexandria is given, or this Ptolemaic region is given to his general Ptolemy. Cassander inherits Macedonia and the Greek kingdoms here. This is the kind of the Seleucid. Seleucus was one of his generals. Seleucid kingdom here, and so on and so forth. Incidentally, the Ptolemaic dynasty, named after his general Ptolemy, is the one that is ruled by Cleopatra many years later during the Roman period, as we'll see. So keep that in the back of your mind. Ptolemy was Greek, and of course then Cleopatra would have had some Greek genes as well. So this empire that Alexander creates, although it was the largest contiguous land empire the world had ever known up to this point, it doesn't last very long, at least politically. It's a big impact, and really the most important thing you need to understand about Alexander's conquest and his empire is that his lasting legacy is not the political state that is created. Rather, it's the cultural effect of his encounters with Asian peoples that's the lasting legacy of Alexander. So, and this is called Hellenization, or the spread of Hellenic culture. Remember, Hellenic culture is Greek culture. And so Hellenization then is the spread of the Greek culture and then combining that culture with Asian culture. So it's kind of a synthesis or a creation of something new, a blending of cultures that takes place during this period, during the Hellenic or Hellenistic period of Greek history. So, as I said, Hellenization is essentially a cultural mixing or a hybridization of Greek and Asian culture. For example, Greek is adopted as the official language of many different Hellenistic cities in the Hellenistic world. Greek soldiers had on their marches intermarried and married Persian and Southwest Asian, Mediterranean, and South Asian women. And so they create, basically a blending of different cultures that way. Greek coins are used in trade. Greek plays are performed throughout the Asian world. Greek scientists and Greek art and Greek philosophy, of course, are spread as well. And so this creates, as I said, a new culture, and this is known as Hellenization. One of the lasting effects of his conquest is that as they're marching east and pushing through Persia and pushing into South Asia, Alexander and his army create many different garrison towns, which were basically military communities that were placed along Alexander's route. That these garrison towns actually then develop as full-fledged Hellenistic cities later. And the routes that are created through these cities set the stage for a lot of large-scale economic contact, trade. And so this is also very, very important. And as you can see here by the map, he's got several different cities named Alexandria. So he kind of likes the name Alexandria. The most famous, of course, would be Alexandria, Egypt. And this is a place it was famous for its very extensive library. And it showed that a lot of these cities and a lot of these places in the Hellenistic world valued culture and learning, but Alexandria extremely famous for its library at the time. And so here you can see kind of a Greek amphitheater, Greek architecture here. Pergamum would have been in Persia, and yet it looks like you could have seen this in Athens. You can see the Doric and Corinthian columns here in the Greek architecture, and then the amphitheater dug into the side where they enjoyed Greek plays in Persia. So, as I said, it's very important to keep in mind that Alexander's main contribution is not really the political empire that he creates, because after all, it does collapse pretty quickly after his death. But it was the establishment of that those connections between the Mediterranean world, the South Asian world, Southwest Asian world, and the establishment of trade routes that had broken through geographic barriers like the Himalayas. And as they're pushing, as Alexander's military army is pushing east, they're creating or carving out trade routes through very, very rough and harsh terrain, like the mountainous terrain of the Himalayas, which had been that barrier between this area of the world that had been connected since ancient river valley civilization times, the Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Indian world. This had been separated, of course, from China. Well, we're going to see in the next unit that some of these towns and these cities, these Hellenistic trade routes that are created during this period, actually set the stage for more intensive interaction and contact between South and Southwest Asia toward the west, with China in the east. And it's actually thanks to Alexander that the development of the Silk Roads take place, and that new ideas and culture is able to diffuse through these means in these places.